Good evening, Evan. So I am a realtor, and as a result, I do come into different, contact with a lot of different people from different backgrounds. But one thing that kind of does come up as like a very commonplace thing, or kind of common mentality that people have, is kind of using national news or national trends to kind of depend on to kind of inform them when to buy and sell their home, which is really interesting. While it is fair to kind of follow national news, in real estate or kind of when to buy and sell a home, you would assume that some people might put more weight on the local market or local news, and because those things are very dependent on how the local market conditions are, and sometimes that directly contradicts or just doesn't match with the national trend. But even then, it's fine if people don't. But even then, what's interesting is that when I give them resources to look into the local market themselves, some still don't. Some still don't out of convenience or just kind of a lack of accessibility. It's not the usual of where their day to day they tune into things or where they would usually get their news. It's become very centralized and mainstream of these huge platforms that they now get their news from, rather than specific areas that are highly localized that they get their news from. What is interesting, that it makes me feel like that there's been a loss of staying power in smaller, more localized news or just politics in general in the age of digitalization. And as you said, that there's that lack of interest in local politics. And I would kind of go on a limb, I think, and I would feel like people may have had more trouble getting into it, kind of similar to how your friend Christian would say that because people move around a lot and they kind of lose interest that way and it doesn't quite apply to them always, and then there's less of a necessity. But another thing to add on top of it is that I think politics has become more less of a place of information to be informed and more of a place now of infotainment. And first, people go to politics and news in a sense of sensationalism, as opposed to asking how those things apply to them specifically, which I think is at a detriment, of course. And it shows as a general lack of interest in local politics, because local politics, I think by nature, aren't as sensational. They aren't as crazy. They're more focused on just what kind of policies are passing, but there's no easily accessible place for people to go to. And at least from my own experience and hearing others, it's just a lot easier to kind of get caught up in nationwide news. Um, so one thing that is really interesting, right? So hearing how you're doing that campaign, helping with that campaign in Illinois, I imagine that in the shoes of a local politician, what they used to, be racing against were the other handful of local politicians. But now, with the attention and how it's being um, kind of treated by everyone, by media and by however else people consume their media, now it's become a competition of going against a sea of other national news, other headlines, and what was used to be like a very, more simplified thing is just more of a huge, huge competition to be able to try and stand out and capture your, quote unquote voters' attention. It's just been a completely different ball game, I assume. But one thing that reminds me of is that I've been watching a lot of John and Hank Green's content, of course, obviously. And one thing that it reminded me of is that they actually have a YouTube channel where they have 50 videos dedicated to each respective state and how that voting system works, and it's intended for people to kind of congregate there and then learn about their state's specific voting system so that they can easily participate in voting, and or more easily, and then kind of be more informed about their local state and how it works. And what that kind of prompts me to question is that the next step, in the age of digitalization and in the age of globalization even, is that the next step of kind of having a very centralized platform for people to know where to go to just find out about their local state? No longer is it something where you have entities of their own things of being able to inform people. Maybe we need something much more powerful, like a nationwide centralized place for people to go to kind of match that accessibility, to maybe match that budget to budget ratio of huge politicians and maybe just still a centralized platform for local politics, local news. You know, I of course maybe that's not the answer, but I don't know what would be the next step. But yeah, those are just kind of my thoughts about it, my response, and yeah. So I'll see you. I'll see you Monday, Evan.